Okay, so hi.
Hello, good to
How
see
are you
you.
doing?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, excited to chat.
Yeah, so Hunter, you're the founder, creative director of the independent production company Breaking Jar, but you're also a writer and director in your own right outside of the company. And I was just wondering if you could tell me a bit about your background in the creative industry and sort of how you got to where you are now.
Mm. Sure, yeah. So when I was, well, to go right back to the beginning, I started writing when I was about 4. So that's the reference point I always go back to. I don't think I was really writing. I was just kind of getting family members to write stuff down for me. But I had ideas and I was drawing pictures and coming up with stories I wanted to tell. And then when I was 7, we got a video camera just to make home movies. And so um, that was when I saw an opportunity of like I could film stuff instead of just writing it down or drawing pictures. I could record it on video. And so then I started getting in front of the camera and again getting like my dad or other family members to film me, like acting and playing different characters. And so from that point on, I think I just kind of kept doing both, like creative writing, trying to write novels. I've never done a whole novel, I've just always tried to, but then also films. Yeah, so like short films and different little videos and stuff. And so I think that's where it started really when I was a kid. And then I've just kept them both going until the present day, but more so on the film side of like telling my own stories on screen and kind of getting all the different parts together to make films, I guess. Yeah.
That's so sweet. I love that you started with just like a home camera. I was sort of like that as well.
Mm.
And speaking of like film and stuff, is there a specific film or piece of media, maybe like a music video or something like that, that stands out to you as being really crucial in shaping your creative vision? You have sort of a very distinctive style. I was wondering if there's anything that specifically you're like, oh, that's what inspired me.
Thank you. Wow, that's a cool question. Um, I think there are lots. There are a few different interesting ones actually. So, um, the company that has shaped me more than anything else is Lego. Because this is such a weird answer, but basically, ever since I was little, since I was about 5, as well as playing with Lego, it wasn't just the toys, it was like the branding that appealed to me. And I used to get all the free catalogs from the toy shop, and then I'd look at every page and I'd read all the like product descriptions. And so, as well as like playing with the physical toys, I was picking up on the stories.
Mm.
And especially like Lego as a company in the early 2000s. I think basically they were on the verge of going bust. And so they were just really getting very creative and experimenting with new stuff. And I've only found out this as an adult when I've researched it, but basically they put so much creativity into like the art and the posters and the stories behind the products. And so
Mm.
you weren't just buying a set of like, a police car and there's a police minifigure or whatever. It would be like all the characters would have names and
Mm.
backstories and they would have distinct art and logos and fonts that they used. And like then this was when the internet was kicking off as well. So there'd be a little link at the bottom of the page that said like www.lego.com. And so it would be like encouraging you to go to the website. And then when you
Mm.
went there, you'd find like videos and cartoons and so much more like world building and
Mm.
games you could play and everything. So I think that kind of inspired me a lot to want to have my own company as well as just making stuff. Is Lego and like all the stories they told. But I think apart from that, there are so many. Um, and yeah, it's not just films, it's so many different bits of media, like TV shows, films, music videos, like you said, magazines, books, comics, just like so many different things that I see and that inspire me in some way. But there's a film called Stalker from the 70s by a Russian director called Tarkovsky, which we were shown at school. And everyone in my class was like, this film is so boring. Why are we being forced to watch this? And I was like, I actually kind of like it. Because I was like, didn't want to admit to anyone, but I was like, I actually really like this, even though they all thought it was boring. Because it's very slow paced. And
Mm.
there'll be some times where like it just holds on a single shot for several minutes,
Mm.
and you just watch the characters just stand there, and they're just looking out at the landscape, and you just get to see like every de detail of the trees and the plants and the sky and everything, and the human's body language. Like it's like you're a fly on the wall. You're just watching people do people things,
Oh, I
and
love
then
that.
after like a really long take, they'll be like, "Should we go?" And the other character will be like, yeah, let's go. And like you've just sat there with them for 5 minutes and like nothing's happened. And I'd never seen something like that before.
Mm.
that like it's okay to slow everything down and
Mm.
just show real life in such an authentic way. And there aren't like flashy transitions and effects and
Mm.
anything like that. It's just like life on camera. And I didn't even understand the language because it was in Russian, but I could read the subtitles and I could see the body language and I could pick up on what was happening. So
Mm.
I think the more time has passed since I saw that, the more Stalker has shaped me a lot stylistically. And a lot of people refer to that as like when they're trying to be a bit indie, they're like, oh yeah, Tarkovsky, yeah.
Oh yeah,
But
really
like
cool.
for me, yeah, like for me, I didn't know there was any of that. It's just I genuinely hadn't ever seen anything like it. So definitely that one. Yeah.
I love the idea of like an extended Lego cinematic universe, like the LCU.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I was obsessed with Lego as a kid as well.
Mhm.
Actually, what you said about how the branding and like the posters and the links to websites and stuff, it's I can see so much of that in sort of how Breaking Jar operates as a company. So you have, these short feature films that you've made with the company, but then also there's so much outreach as well. There's so many different levels to it, a lot of interconnected things. So
Mhm.
specifically for you, what is Breaking Jar's aim? Like, there's so many different aspects to it, but
Mhm.
to you personally, what is the main goal?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm trying to simplify everything down to the motto, which is stories changing lives.
Yeah.
So it's just those three words, and everything we do has to come back to that in some way.
Mm.
And to expand on that, it's basically the idea that fictional films and media can actually impact our lives in a meaningful way, not just be like trash, like entertainment that you put on in the background that's
Yeah.
kind of like a waste of time. It's actually really impactful work that we're doing. And so everything is about stories changing lives, whether that's in the obvious way that it impacts the audience because they watch one of the films and they feel impacted by it, or in a more kind of behind the scenes way where the process of making it impacts people's lives. So for the cast and crew and the people that are involved in the production process, that they have a positive experience and that it
Mm.
actually they get something out of it that helps them in some way as well. So it's that the impact of filmmaking and storytelling should be a positive one, both
Yeah.
like behind the scenes and on screen. Um, so everything else around that, if we're doing like a social media campaign or an event or something like that, it has to just be something to do with getting people into films and filmmaking
Hmm.
in order to make a positive impact on their lives through that. So that's kind of the common thread, I think, it's all meant to come back to that. Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like filmmaking for you is very personal. It's very like you really commit a lot of yourself to it. And I really love the stories changing lives sort of motto, for lack for a better word, because it really shows how individualistic and important media and art can be. But it's also incredibly difficult when you're dedicating so much of yourself.
Mm.
So the creative industry is known for being very difficult to get started out in.
Yeah.
In the early days of starting the company, what would you say was the most challenging moment? And then what was the most rewarding?
Mm. I think I'm still in it right now because like it's still, even though I set it up 4 years ago, it's still early days. So I can tell you, yeah, for sure. So do you say most challenging and most rewarding?
Yeah,
Oh man.
it's all challenging.
It's all challenging. Yeah, I think um there are two things that are most challenging. One is negative feedback
Mm,
and one is no feedback. And I don't
okay.
know which is worse because when somebody says something critical where like they're not happy about something or they disagree with something or whatever, that's a massive blow because as you say, like I put so much of myself into everything and I genuinely believe in everything that I'm doing. And even if I'm doing something that's kind of like a bit menial or quite far away from the main mission, like I'm just sending out emails or like trying to crop a picture for an Instagram post or something, even like a mundane task like that, it's all coming back to the mission of trying to genuinely impact people's lives. And so if somebody like criticizes it or like, disagrees with something I've written in the email or doesn't like the post or something, then that hurts a bit because like I'm doing it for a reason. Like I really have put heart into it. But on the other hand, that at least they engage. Like even if someone gives negative feedback, at least they care enough to feedback. I think
Yeah.
maybe the biggest challenge is apathy, where people just don't care. Like
Mm.
when you post something and it gets zero reactions, it doesn't get any positive comments or any criticism. It just gets nothing.
Just dead.
Yeah, just like it does, it might as well not even exist. And I think, especially with our generation and like social media, that is a big challenge of like where you put something out there, basically expecting validation because it's social
Mm.
media. Like you're not putting it out there to get no likes. Like you're
That's
expecting
so
to get
true.
likes. Like you're not like when you put on an event, you're not doing it for no one to turn up. Like you're
Yeah.
expecting people to turn up. That's the whole purpose. And so then when nobody turns up, or which has happened. Like I've run events that had zero attendance, or
Oof.
like when you create a product that makes zero sales, or when
Mm.
you create a whole suite of products where you're like, they can buy this and then they can upgrade to this, and then we can help them with this, and then we can provide this, and then they'll have the whole package to be able to do that thing. And then you have zero sales on any of them, which has also happened as well. It's like, you mean I just spent an entire year like creating this whole thing to benefit people, and the number of people who've benefited from it is zero. Like it's like I'd almost rather they bought it, hated it, and then given me some feedback rather than
Absolutely.
just like
Not
not
doing
put.
anything.
Yeah, because now it's like it has had absolutely zero impact on anybody. Um, so I think that's probably the most frustrating is where
Mm.
there's like a void and where you feel like just this apathy of like people aren't paying attention.
Mm.
Um, I think the most rewarding then is when people do get involved and where they tell me that like it's impacted them in a positive way. Um, and so like obviously where there's like praise, that's very nice. Where somebody says like, well done, great job, I really enjoyed that, that was great. That's really nice. But when they say it impacted them, um, that really means a lot. I think one of the most rewarding moments is on Sparks May Fly, which is a short film we did last year.
Mm.
I hope she won't mind me sharing this, but our cinematographer Gabby, our director of photography, she shot every frame of the film, so she
Mm.
took charge of that whole role. And there was a point where we'd miscalculated the tide times, and so we were down by the River Thames, and I was expecting to have a whole beach to shoot on, and we had about an inch of like pebbles just before the wall, because the waves were coming right up to the wall. And so there was
Mm.
like no ground. And so Gabby was there with her very expensive camera, like squatting down under the stairs, like trying not to get waves like cover her with water. And I was so paranoid that like the camera was going to get wet or something. And I was freaking out because I was like, poor Gabby must be so stressed right now. Like she's about to get like drowned by the waves. Um, and then I just looked at her and her eyes were just glowing, like she was having so much fun. She was just like she was feeling so fulfilled and she was having such an enjoyable experience getting to do what she loves, which
Mm.
is like the cinematography side of things and getting to, angle those shots and capture exactly the frames that she wanted to capture. Using her own camera, using her own tastes and her own like visual style.
Yeah.
Um, and by putting that project together, I had created an opportunity for her to come and practice her craft.
Mm.
And I was getting stressed out. But then when I looked at her, I could see she wasn't feeling any of that stress. She was just so happy to be there. And if I hadn't written that script, organized that team, chosen that location, like made the whole thing happen as a director, she wouldn't have had the opportunity to come and do that. And
Mm.
so I think seeing other people get joy from the projects in one way or another, and like stories changing lives, like seeing them actually get something real out of it, that's
Mm.
probably the most rewarding because it's, as you say, like I put so much of myself into it, but it's when it ends up being not about me at all. I think that's
Mm.
probably the most rewarding, where like somebody else is actually loving it in their own right. It's like this is bigger than me now.
Mm.
I think that's really cool. Yeah.
That is really cool. I love that. I love that story. It shows also how important it is to have a good team around you. Breaking Jar is, as you say, in the early stages. It's very sort of a smaller production company. When you are choosing collaborators to work with, or reaching out to people, or they reach out to you and say, "Okay, I have this idea," or "I want to do this. I've written this script," or blah blah blah. What stands out to you as being the reason of, oh, okay, right, I'm going to go with this person? Is there a certain thing? Is it a certain, I don't know, a way that they approach you? Or do you actually go specifically for projects over people?
Yeah. I think it is about the person, definitely.
Mm.
And because I think whatever projects they're making will come out of who they are as a person and like their
So
ethos and
true.
their values. Um, Sometimes I have said to people like, I really want to work with you, but I don't feel comfortable with some of the basically like some of the stuff in your project doesn't really align with the values that Breaking Jar has.
Hmm.
And I don't want you to have to compromise your story to try and fit in with us because
Yeah.
that just wouldn't be fun for you or for us. And
Mm.
so, do you have any other stories that we could work on together? Because I'd really love to work with you, but I don't think it's fair for us to like, say yes to a project that isn't actually really aligned because
Yeah.
then either we're going to influence you to change it, which would
Mm.
suck for you because it's your story, or more likely it would just be frustrating because we'd be sort of butting heads a bit. So I'm getting very good at saying no to stuff that isn't aligned just because I'm like, it's just not a good idea. Like it's not going to be
Mm.
fair for either of us. Um, and so in terms of what I do look for, I think, yeah, there is an element of like looking at particular projects, but it is mostly about the person. The biggest thing that I ask myself, and usually I ask them, is what's in it for you?
Mm.
Because if they are trying to do me a favor, I don't really like that as a dynamic because I'm like, if you're just doing this to be nice or because you think we need it, like Breaking Jar, like me and the people involved with Breaking Jar, we have plenty of our own stuff to be getting on with anyway.
Mm.
So we don't need anyone's ideas to be like, here you go, do this. I'm
Mm.
like, thanks. I already have a million of my own ideas that like I'm struggling to execute on. Um, and so it's like, what's the benefit to them? Like, why do they want to be involved with us? What's what's the benefit to them going to be? Like, what are their selfish reasons for
Mm.
them for wanting to do this? Like, what are they going to get out of it? Because if they have that, then they will be genuinely motivated
Mm.
to do it for their own reasons. And
Yeah.
I already know that we're motivated. Like, I already know we're keen. So if
Mm.
they're genuinely keen as well, then we can kind of run alongside each other and make it happen. Um, but if they're doing it for any other reasons, just like out of a sense of obligation or like someone told them to, or it seemed like a good idea, or they were just trying to be nice, or they didn't want to say no, or whatever. I'm
Mm.
like, that's not, they're probably not going to stick around. Like, that's not
No.
very compelling. So I think genuinely the biggest thing I look for is like what's in it for them, in terms of collaborators. I think one other thing in terms of films that we make and projects that we do is I'm still figuring this out, but I feel that they should always have kind of an upwards trajectory where the
Okay.
stories are giving people hope in some way.
Mm.
Because that's something we can talk about that more if you like, but I've found that like stories can make me really anxious if they are kind of pessimistic, or
Yeah.
they can inspire
We've
me
got
and make me
enough of
feel
that
good.
pessimism. We don't need any
Yeah,
more.
exactly. Yeah. And so I'm like, and yeah, I think it's easier to make a really depressing film because you just
Mm.
have like some really horrible stuff happen and then everyone gets really disturbed by it. It's harder to make something that's like genuinely uplifting. So I think that's
Yeah.
more of a challenge. And so I look for stories that, even if they deal with like really difficult subject matter, um, sometimes I'm like, this has certain, content in it that I'm not even sure if we can touch this. But then I read it and I'm like, well, fair enough. Like it shows how human beings work through this very complicated issue and then get come out the other side and they do find a solution or things get better or like they understand it and there's a feeling of like I don't know, like authenticity and honesty, like they're actually dealing with it. They're not just like sensationalizing it and using it
Mm.
as entertainment. They're actually kind of addressing the issues as issues.
Mm.
Um, so that's something as well is I'm like, how do stories deal with certain subject matter? Um, and how is that addressed? Whether that's
Mm.
like sexuality, violence, uh, a lot of the
Sparks May
stuff,
Fly dealt with
yeah,
addiction, didn't it? Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. I
yeah,
know that that was like a really strong thread
yeah,
through Sparks May Fly.
100%. And that was something that, yeah, I really wanted to delve into that.
Mm.
Um, and we went for it in a way that's very sort of metaphorical. So I was
Yeah.
hoping that people could relate to it, not just about substance addiction, but about any kind of like negative habits or negative cycles, that they could kind of see a bit of their own life in that metaphor and then connect with it. And in the story of Sparks May Fly, the character kind of it gets worse, but then it gets better, and then they actually find a solution at the end. And so it's not that like everything's great now and everything's fixed. You know, they might fall again, but it's like we're showing in that 20-minute film, we're showing a solution.
Yeah.
We're not just using it as entertainment
Yeah.
to make everybody like, oh, that was such a good film. Like it was so intense. Everything was
Yeah.
so bad. Like I'm like, I have this desire to make it a bit more uplifting, a bit more optimistic than that. So yeah, that was a bit of a rambly answer, but I think
No,
goes
no,
to sort of
that's
the
really
different
cool.
elements. Yeah.
That's really interesting. As someone who sort of knows about the projects that Breaking Jar have done, I could really, now that you've explained, I really see that thread through a lot of the work that you've done, even before Breaking Jar, when you were working and doing your own films during university and stuff.
Mm,
The idea that there has to be some level of like growth or progression.
mm.
And I also massively agree that like the sensationalization of really horrific things is very common in media
Yeah.
nowadays because it grabs people's attention. Whereas, yeah, it's definitely harder to make a happy film than it is to make a sad film. So I think that's really, really important. Um, you've sort of used these different approaches towards filmmaking. You started off sort of doing your own thing as a writer director. Now, whilst you are still leaning into that, you're sort of taking a step back more as a creative director and you're helping other people tell their stories. How do you think you personally have changed as a creative by putting on these different hats? You know, you've seen sort of both sides of it. How do you think you've changed when you personally approach a project, do you think you've changed with how you look at it?
That's a good question. Um, I think the first thing I'll say is that just recently I've been thinking about taking my own advice because, yeah, like through Breaking Jar, I've been helping other people to develop their own films. And so I've been teaching them like specific principles that they can apply and exercises that they can do. And just in the last few weeks, I've started doing a few of those myself for films that I'm working on of like, I should do my own homework, like I should do the
Mm.
exercise. And it really works. So I'm like, okay, good. I've been teaching them good stuff because I'm practicing it on my own things. Um, I think in general, it's made me like kind of formularize everything because in order to teach other people, I've needed to put very abstract ideas into like formulas and frameworks and methods that are like step by step and
Mm.
break them down and create resources that they can use. And even breaking that down into a checklist of like, well, how do you actually make a film? Because I've just
Yeah.
been kind of doing it. I've never like I didn't go to film school. I've never like read a whole textbook about it or anything. So I'm
Mm.
like, how do I do the things that I do? And so I've been thinking about breaking it down and like understanding what all the technical terms are and making sure that I'm using them correctly to describe the stuff I was just doing kind of instinctively. And so it's like, what is an assistant director and what do they actually do? Because
Mm.
I just had a friend helping me out, and I was the director, so I called them the assistant director. Like, so I think my approach has maybe got more professional in that I'm having to like use all the correct terminology for stuff that
Yeah.
I was just doing kind of spontaneously before, in order to communicate clearly with other filmmakers. And I think another way it's changed is to really break it down. So it's not this abstract creative thing, but it's actually a very like tangible sort of practical thing of
Mm.
like almost like a recipe of like step by step. How do you do something very abstract, like how do you put some of yourself into your film? How do you like express emotions and things that you've personally been through in your own life and then express that in a creative way? I've now
Yeah.
got like steps that I follow for how to do that. And so it takes the very kind of emotionally charged creative stuff, which I do more naturally, and it puts it into a framework, which I can then, if I get lost, I can just go back to my framework and be like, okay, stick to the plan, Hunter, like step two, step three. And so I have a lot more structure around it now because I've had to develop those structures to teach other people what to do. So I think it's really cool. Like it makes it a lot easier to do it and to feel safe doing it and to
Mm.
feel a sense of security of like, I'm actually going to deliver a film and make it to the end of the project because I have a recipe that I'm following
Yeah.
rather than just kind of hoping for the best and figuring it out.
Just
Yeah,
following your gut instincts, just trying stuff.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's sort of like how everyone sort of starts out, especially in the creative industries. You have this passion, you have an idea of what you want to do, but you don't really know how to do it. And you're sort of just sort of like fumbling around in the dark. So if there is a young creative who's watching this who has a script or who wants to get some experience as a cinematographer, what can Breaking Jar do for them? What is Breaking Jar's role?
Mm. Yeah, for sure. So basically, the two things Breaking Jar does is we make our own films and we help other people to make their own films. And so if you are looking for experience as a producer, cinematographer, makeup artist, costume designer, actor, composer, sound, lighting, like any of the different crew roles, we will have some of our own projects coming up which you can maybe get involved with. So
Mm,
we're always looking for people to like possibly join the teams of our own films. But obviously we can only do those like however often we have capacity
mm,
to do an entire production. And so the other thing that we're doing is helping other people to get their own films made. And that's like that generates a lot more activity because we might only do a film once every year or two at the
mm,
moment. But then we can maybe help like 5 people every month to get their own films up and running. And so if you have any interest in writing and directing, we can support you to get your own short film production off the ground as a director.
mm,
And then you're going to need actors and a cinematographer and a producer and a team and a crew. And so then we can reach out to our network and let people know about your project and about the roles that you have coming up so they can all apply to be a part of your project. So yeah, so it's mostly like we make our own films, and that's
mhm,
usually with me as a director. Um, but then we can also support other aspiring directors to make their films. And
mhm,
so if you want to direct like I do, then I can help you do that. Or if you want to be a part of a production in one role or another, then we can offer you potentially roles on people's projects. Does that make sense?
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that's it's really important work. I think that you're doing just as sort of as we're coming to the end of this, um, because it is very difficult to get into this industry. Breaking Jar plays such a crucial role in making sure that people have that access. Um, so well done.
Thank you. I
And I
appreciate
think
that.
my final sort of question is where do you want the company to go? As in, what do you want the company to have achieved in, let's say, like 5 years? Um, and then also briefly, how can people get in contact with Breaking Jar? Sort of a double question.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. In terms of the long-term production the company like AIM, um, I had this thought that I wanted to be, I can't remember the phrase, it was something like, and this is probably not in 5 years, this is maybe in like a few decades. But it was
Big
like,
dreams.
yeah, the big dream, the like lifetime goal would be to be the world's, I think of something like the world's favorite production company. So,
Oh,
because at the moment you have big powerhouses like Disney that
mm,
are just churning out loads of stuff, and you have people that love Disney and they love Mickey Mouse and like all the characters and all the world around it, and they go to Disneyland and it's like their
mm,
favorite place. And then you have people who hate Disney because they see Disney as this like corporate giant that's just like a
mm.
soulless machine
Just
like
churning stuff
turning out
out.
content and like yeah, that's like exploiting us all as audience members. And so I was like, I'd like to be the world's favorite. And then I changed that to like the people's favorite because I was like, if it got that big, then everyone would pro like the industry would probably hate us because we'd be like taking their job, like you're doing it better than them. But then we'd be the people's favorite, so it would be like the people's champion. And then I realized that I had put myself into a corner there because you're never going to please everyone.
No,
And so if
everyone's a
you
critic.
exactly. And so trying to be the people's favorite, I was like, that is not really a pedestal that I'd want it to be on. Like, yeah. And so then I rethought it. So my current aim is to be God's favorite production company. And that means a lot to me because that's from like my personal faith and like the values that I try and practice.
Mm,
And so it was like at the end of the day, if I do everything for an audience of one, which is just God,
mm,
then I trust that those principles and values are going to produce the kind of results that will benefit people and have a positive impact in society. But I'm not going to rely on people's opinions, like to be the people's favorite. And
no,
so yeah, so it's just like basically trying to like keep doing what we're doing and do it better and do more of it. Um, Not necessarily bigger, although I'd like to, just because it's fun to be like Breaking Jar is now a huge company and we have
Yeah.
offices and staff and everything. But it's not necessarily about the scale, it's more about like the amount of impact. And so in a way, I quite like the idea of being kind of in the shadows of
Yeah.
like people don't necessarily know about us until they do. So it's like
Mm.
what I really want, actually, in terms of 5 year goal, something I really want to happen is that the people in the industry, like in the film studios and the agencies and the, directors and everyone, um, will just start hearing of Breaking Jar kind of as a side effect. Because it'll be like they have loads of people applying for roles on their productions, and on their CV it says like they did so and so at
Yeah.
Breaking Jar. Or it's like they're applying for funding for their film, and it's like just went through the mentoring program at Breaking Jar. Now I'm looking for funding. Or they'll have like a load of actors applying to be in their film, and all their self tapes are like they've used a script from a Breaking Jar film. And so
Yeah.
it's like, who is Breaking Jar? Like, who
Why
are
are they
these people? Yeah,
everywhere?
and so I just want to be like at the grassroots level, like as you were saying, helping people get into film at
Yeah.
entry level, like because it's so hard to just get your foot in the door. So being that first step for people, and so then it's like Breaking Jar is like a tiny little door that everybody has been through, and so then the people in the industry, the big, giants, are like, "What's Breaking Jar? Like, where have all these people come from?" And it's people that might not have been there otherwise. Like
Mm.
we've made a way for them to get in. So yeah, I think that's in 5 years. I just like people in the film industry to like not be able to ignore it because it keeps coming up and everybody seems to have benefited from Breaking Jar in some way. Um, so that would be a cool 5 year goal, I think.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
love that. Stories changing lives really sticks with the motto,
Yeah.
influencing people, making things better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Mm.
It's a
Thank
good
you.
goal.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. And then, well, sorry, was there another part of your question?
Yeah, just to sort of
Yeah.
close off, how do people get in contact with you? I know there's a
Mm.
website and a form on the website. Could you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So the website, breakingjar.com, learning from the Lego company, of course. I try and keep everything simple. So
From the
it's
LCU.
exactly, yeah, yeah, the Lego universe. So www.breakingjar.com, all one word. And if you go to the website, you'll see just a few simple pages that you can go to. And one of them is called Your Story. And that is breakingjar.com/careers. So
Mm,
if you click on Your Story or you go to breakingjar.com/careers, that's how to get your own story told or progress your own career. So if you're looking for work experience, training, mentoring, networking, community, resources, or you're looking to actually make your own film and you want to get some support from us as a director, then that's all there. So breakingjar.com/careers. There's just like a quick questionnaire that you fill in. It's free, and then we get all that information into our database so we can keep you on our mailing list and hopefully let you know when there's like more relevant stuff. And we might just be able to reach out to you at some point and let you know about something that you might like to have a go at, any opportunities coming up. So yeah, it's just sort of growing our community, and it means we can give you more like specific support. And also, I think going through the questionnaire is quite helpful just for your own clarity,
mm.
because there are a few questions on there like what stage are you at in your career? And you might not really have thought about that before. And so it sort of makes you categorize yourself into different boxes, which I think is quite helpful for your own clarity of like, what am I looking for? Like, what
Where
would be
am
helpful?
I?
Yeah, like, what do I need right now? And so then if you fill that in, then you get your own clarity and we get your answers. So then we can start offering you the things that you need. So that's the idea. So breakingjar.com/careers. Yeah.
Lovely. And then, is there anything else that you want to say that I haven't really asked you about?
Hmm. Um,
We sort of
well,
went all over the place with those questions.
yeah. Well, no, that was awesome. Firstly, thank you, Rose, for taking the time to do this. It's really nice to chat with you and really nice to have the time to talk a bit about Breaking Jar.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think I would just like to say to people that filmmaking is not as complicated as you think it is. And I'm not trying to do myself out of a job by saying that, because obviously a lot of what Breaking Jar is helping people to make films. Um, I'm trying to show you that it's more accessible than you think. And you may have an idea of what filmmaking is, which is that like you suffer for 25 years and then you get a job as like a junior team member at the BBC, like making coffee for people. And that's like career goals. And all your family members hate you because you've like not made any money. And you're destined to like be a starving artist, living in a basement somewhere. Um, and like when I was younger, I thought that filmmaking meant that like you wear certain types of clothes
Mm.
and live a certain kind of lifestyle, and it didn't seem very aspirational. And it's
Yeah.
like everyone's angry and frustrated because their career isn't going anywhere, and like everyone's jealous of like the 1%. It's like, oh, it's all well and good for Leo DiCaprio, but what about the rest of us, like
Yeah.
suffering? And it's just so much like negative energy around it. And so I want filmmaking to be something that people feel is like fun and light and
Mm.
positive. And I think especially today with the technology we have, it's much more accessible than it used to be. So it's worth having a go at it and using it as a tool to actually have a positive impact rather than just being bitter like all these other people. So yeah, that would be my feeling about filmmaking. Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
I actually really needed to hear that personally. I was
Mm.
like, yeah, that is true. That's why I got into this industry, was to have fun and to make stuff.
Yeah.
And you're so right, you get so bogged down in the corporateness of it all. But yeah, fundamentally, art's meant to be creative and fun and collaborative, and I really think that's what Breaking Jar's doing. So yeah, really nice to speak to you. I think that's all my questions done.
Thank you so much, Rose. Yeah,
That's
lovely to
all
speak with
right.
you.